Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Hill. Nice to meet you. While I get my PowerPoint loaded, I'm going to introduce myself, share my screen. There we go. And get everything ready to go. So, welcome to Biology 2404. This video will be very similar to videos that you'll see throughout the semester. I will be lecturing on the PowerPoints that are posted on Canvas in our modules. So welcome to class. We're going to get started. I'm going to try to get this out of my way. 1 second. Yeah, we don't need video. Okay. There we go. Start the slideshow from the beginning. All right, so this is chapter 1. This will be the first half of chapter 1. I will also post another video that you can click the link in Canvas to the second half of this lecture. So I'm going to break up videos into chunks so that they're a little bit more manageable. Hopefully those chunks will be 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes 25 to 30. I think this first chapter will take me about a half hour to get through each, 25 to 30 minutes to get through each lecture, each half of the lecture. So I'm going to try to keep it to about 20 minutes per video, just so that you don't have to sit and watch a really long video all at once. Hopefully that'll make it manageable. If you guys have any questions while you're watching this or while you're studying, send me an email or we can start a Zoom video conference. That's a link in Canvas as well on the left-hand side of our page. I have to invite you to that, so we can certainly do that, or we can start a Canvas discussion and do like an office hour kind of thing. Feedback for that is really easy. So either way, send me an email or we can start a Canvas discussion, and that discussion can be seen by everybody, so we can ask questions whenever you need to. All right, so in most of my PowerPoints, you will see a slide that looks like this, and it's a basic study guide. By the end of today, you should be able to do these things. So follow through, kind of pause the video, read through these, and kind of get an understanding of what you're expected and what we're going to learn and what we're going to cover today in this lecture. To start off, we're going to talk about what anatomy and physiology actually are and the difference between the two. So anatomy is the study of the structures of the body. So think about structures in your arm, like the bones. You have a humerus in the upper arm, and you have two bones, the radius and the ulna, in your lower arm. Anatomy is defining or describing or identifying structures of the body and the physiological or physical relationships among those body parts. Gross anatomy, and I'm going to pull up my cursor here. There it is. Gross anatomy would be something studying structures that you can see with your eye. No need for a microscope to see those structures. Like, here's the heart. Here is the heart in macroscopic or gross anatomy, and you can see here's the right atrium, one of the 4 chambers of the heart that blood flows into and out of. Here's the right ventricle, another chamber that blood flows into and out of in the heart. These blood vessels, here's the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, 2 major blood vessels that supply blood to that right side of the heart, the right atrium and right ventricle. These are structures that you can see without the need of a microscope. It's macroscopic anatomy. Microscopic anatomy are structures that you can't see without magnification from some type of microscope. So in this same figure, if you take a small section of the heart and then make it larger by looking at it under a microscope, you can actually see the layers of the heart. So you can see in this figure, there's several layers. Layer here, a layer here, a big thick layer of tissue here, and then 2 more layers out here. These layers create an organ, and those layers can't really be seen, and the difference between those layers can't be seen unless you're magnifying those layers under a microscope. So that's microscopic anatomy. Physiology is really form or function. Physiology considers the function of the human body. So those anatomic structures that we will learn along the way, how do they work? What do they do? What is their function? It's much more complex and difficult to examine than just the anatomical structures. Think anatomy is identification, physiology is function. How do these structures work together? What's their goal? What's their job? And that focuses on functional properties. But anatomy and physiology are really tightly related in theory and practice, and you can't understand physiology without first learning anatomy. For example, take a look here. This is your arm. Those bones I just mentioned on a few slides back, there's your humerus bone in the upper arm. And down here, you have two bones in your lower arm, the ulna and the radius. Those two bones, along with the humerus, create the elbow joint, which is right here. That elbow joint, if you look really closely, is mostly created by two bones connecting to one another. Those two bones are the ulna and the head of the ulna, this one part of that bone. Can you see this C shape right here? That C shape is necessary for the function of the ulna. So follow this C shape right over here to right here. See how that C shape is located right there? Well, this bone here is the humerus. So follow me in the opposite direction. Here's this humerus bone. The very end of that humerus bone is rounded. That rounded shape of the humerus fits into here, the C shape of the ulna. Now, think about this. What does your elbow do? What can it do? What function can it perform, or what movement can you do with your elbow? Go ahead and do it. Pause the video and do that. Flexing and extending. If you're flexing and extending your elbow, you're using muscle to move that bone, right? So like here is your bicep muscle. That's called the biceps brachii. That bicep muscle pulls on the bones in the lower arm, the ulna, and flexes your elbow. So basically your wrist moves closer to your shoulder. And then to extend it, there's other muscles involved in that as well. So flexing your elbow would be moving your wrist closer to your shoulder. Extending it would be moving it farther away. To do that, the bones in your elbow have to be shaped this way. The humerus has to be rounded. The head of the ulna has to be a C shape. If those bones were shaped in any other way, the elbow wouldn't be able to flex and extend. So this allows the shape, the anatomic structure of these bones allows for movement in one plane. And those anatomic structures also impose limits. You're not able to really move the elbow in any other way because those bones are shaped that way. So the function of them is related to their anatomic structure. The body is extremely complex. All of those bones that we just talked about, and the muscle in your arm, and the joint that was created by those bones, starts at a very simple makeup and becomes more and more complex as you get closer and closer to the actual structures that we'll learn, like bones. Each level is more complex than the underlying one, and all of it can be broken down to a chemical component. That chemical component at the smallest level of you, think about what you're made up of. Atoms create molecules, and these molecules form three-dimensional shapes from the anatomic components that become functional units inside cells. So within a cell, molecules are located. We'll talk about some molecules that create some functional proteins. But atoms are what create these molecules. So it's at the simplest level, you're made up of atoms that combine to form molecules. Molecules basically also form together to create the components of a cell. And cells are the smallest living units in the body, and they function depending on organelles. An organelle is a little miniature organ within a cell. For example, a mitochondrion that provides energy, or ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That's your major energy molecule in your body. That energy molecule is produced, it's synthesized, created inside mitochondria. And that mitochondrion is an example of an organelle that is composed of molecules. Molecules are composed of atoms. Organelles within a cell help the cell function and stay living. So a mitochondrion is just one example of an organelle within a cell. That organelle happens to provide energy for a cell, and it provides energy. You can find mitochondrion in pretty much any cell in the body. Those cells require mitochondria because they require ATP production to work. For example, in a muscle cell, particularly a heart muscle cell, that muscle cell contracts and relaxes to pump blood. It helps the heart pump blood throughout the body. Without ATP from mitochondrion, that muscle won't contract, so it won't do its job. Its function relies on this organelle, the mitochondrion, generating ATP to contract. Cells create tissues. So a tissue is a group of cells that work together to perform a specific function. So we'll talk about tissue like muscle tissue. Muscle tissue has 3 different types. Heart muscle tissue. It's called cardiac muscle. The term cardiac means heart. We'll talk more about that as we go. And those heart muscle cells collectively form cardiac muscle tissue. That muscle tissue is what contracts and relaxes. Each cell contracts and relaxes in that tissue to perform the job of the heart, pumping blood. Tissues, and there's several different types. We'll talk about the 4 different types of tissues in the coming chapters. Tissues are tissues grouped together, one or more, typically more, tissues grouped together to form an organ, like the heart. The heart is an example of an organ, or your liver, or your kidney, your lungs. Those are all organs that are composed of several types of tissues. For example, epithelial tissue, or connective tissue, or muscle tissue, or nervous tissue. Those tissues group together to form an organ that is fully functional, 3-dimensional, in layers, and that organ performs a function. Just like a tissue performs a function, like muscle tissue contracts and relaxes, tissues then group together to perform the function of an organ. Organs then group together to form an organ system. And those each organ system accomplishes a specific goal, like the cardiovascular system has the heart and blood vessels. And those 2 organs work together to pump blood to and from every tissue in the body. Organ systems have their own job, but also work together with other organ systems to create you as the organism, the highest level of organization where all organ systems work together to maintain life and keep you healthy. The organ systems you should be familiar with, all 11. You should be familiar with organs within each organ system and the functions of these organ systems. So we'll talk about that right now. The integumentary system protects the body from environmental hazards. So think about it. Pause the video, write down an organ that you can find in the integumentary system. Hopefully you wrote skin. That's the major organ of the integumentary system. This system not only protects you from environmental hazards, but controls body temperature. There's accessory structures like sweat glands. When you get hot and need to cool off, what happens in your skin? You start to sweat, right? To sweat helps air pass by. As air passes by, that helps cool you down. Basically, the sweat and the liquid on your skin cools off, and that helps cool down your body temperature. So not only is this skin a physical barrier, your skin protects you from pathogens or toxins or harmful substances in the environment, but it also helps control body temperature by using some accessory glands in the skin to help cool you off or heat you up, actually, as well, if you become too cold. The skeletal system. I know you're thinking, well, yeah, the skeletal system is made up mostly of bone, but there's other structures there as well, like tendons and ligaments, or cartilage, not tendons and ligaments, cartilage. The cartilage that helps connect bone to bone, or like this here is cartilage, this blue is cartilage, here between the vertebrae is cartilage. So cartilage and bone mostly make up the skeletal system. And this system supports your body, right? It provides structure. It protects soft tissues. So think about this here. Right here is your rib cage. What soft tissues or organs are protected within this cage? Think about that. Pause the video and write down 2 organs that you can find in this area that would be protected by the bone. Did you write down lungs and heart? If not, take a look at another figure where you can see the ribs and all the organs inside here and see where the heart and the lungs are located. Bone also stores minerals like calcium and forms blood cells. So the major site of blood cell production, like red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, all of those cells are formed in some way in bone and sent out into the blood from there. The muscular system moves and supports. So all of this red tissue is all skeletal muscle. So like here's your pec muscle, your pectoralis major, your abdominal muscles. There's your 6-pack or your 8-pack, right? Those muscles all support and move you. So where the ribs are located up here in the thoracic cavity, we'll talk about later, there's muscle and bone to support the tissues that underlie this area here. But there isn't any bone here. So the muscle provides the support there and also produces heat. So as muscle moves around, there's friction between muscles that produces heat. And also as metabolism occurs, the metabolic processes run inside those cells. Heat is a byproduct of all that. So it helps maintain your body temperature. The nervous system is special. It has a huge role by receiving information from sensory stimuli in the environment. It directs a response to those stimuli. So basically, think about this. If you put your hand on a hot stove, what's your response? To pull it away, right? You stick your hand on that stove, you think, oh my gosh, that's way too hot for my hand, and you pull your hand away. That's your nervous system protecting you from burning yourself. So if the burn though, or the feeling of that hot temperature on the stove is a stimulus. That stimulus, by way of nerves in the nervous system, so nerves and neurons, the neuron is the major cell type of this nervous system. So nerves, the spinal cord, the brain, those are all organs in this nervous system. And nerves sense changes in the environment. So a stimulus is what tells those nerves or excites those nerves to send a signal to the central nervous system. The central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord here. That stimulus, information about that stimulus, is sent to the brain to integrate that information and say, okay, what are we going to do, or what do we need to do about that stimulus to make sure that we stay healthy? Well, your brain and spinal cord then send information along another set of nerves to coordinate that activity or to coordinate the response to that stimulus. So say the stimulus was you put your hand on a hot stove. That signal about that heat, that temperature, is sent by nerves to your brain. And your brain says, that's too hot. We can't do that or we're going to get hurt. So your brain then sends another signal out to the muscle in your arm to coordinate an activity to keep you safe. And that activity is pull your hand away from that hot stove. So your nervous system is really special. It coordinates and directs and modulates all kinds of different things in your body to keep you safe and healthy. The endocrine system is unique as well. So the nervous system uses nerves and neurons to communicate. The endocrine system uses hormones. So think of an example of a hormone in your body. Pause the video and write down the name of a hormone that you know. Those hormones are what the endocrine system uses to communicate from structure to structure, or organ to organ, or area to area in the body. It directs long-term changes in activities of other organs by producing hormones. So the organs of the endocrine system are a little bit funky because these organs are organs of other systems as well, like the kidneys, for example. Here, the kidneys are part of what other major organ system? The urinary system, right? Or the pancreas. Here's the pancreas. The pancreas is part of the digestive system, but it also can produce hormones, meaning that it's an endocrine organ. So if an organ in your body can produce a hormone, and a hormone is a molecule or a substance that is secreted into the bloodstream, that organ is considered part of the endocrine system. So kidneys, even if that organ is part of another organ system, if it produces a hormone, it can be an endocrine organ. Up in here in the head would be like the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland. There's some glands in the brain. Here's the thyroid gland, the thymus gland, and down here would be the gonads. In the male, that would be the testis, and female, that is the ovary. All of those organs, most of those organs, but not all, are part of another organ system, but they can also be considered endocrine organs because they produce hormones. The cardiovascular system we've mentioned, it transports cells and dissolve, like red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets that are produced from the skeletal system. So these organ systems, this is the first time we'll talk about organ systems kind of communicating with one another or crossing over. The cells that are transported in the cardiovascular system, red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, are actually produced from the skeletal system, transported by the cardiovascular system. Like red blood cells, their job is to transport oxygen. Where does oxygen come from? The lungs, right? So now we've got crossover from the skeletal system, the respiratory system, and the cardiovascular system. So the job of the cardiovascular system, by using the heart and blood vessels, the two organs that make up the cardiovascular system, is to carry nutrients, wastes, and gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide throughout the body. And oxygen and carbon dioxide are then exchanged at the lungs, between the lungs and the blood. So when you breathe air in, oxygen is sent from the lungs to the blood. And when you breathe out, carbon dioxide is sent from the blood to the lungs so you can breathe it out. So we've got even more crossover here. The lymphatic system defends against disease and infection. And the lymphatic system uses organs like the thymus, which is also an endocrine organ, or the spleen, and these green vessels that are called lymphatics or lymphatic vessels. Those lymphatics and those little bumps here are lymph nodes. If you've ever been sick, you usually find swollen, painful lymph nodes up in your neck. Those lymph nodes are part of the lymphatic vessels that are fighting infection and helping filter infection out of your body. So the lymphatic system uses those organs to defend against disease, basically. The respiratory system has a pretty big job. It delivers air to the site where gas exchange can occur between the air and the blood. And the gases that are exchanged are oxygen and carbon dioxide. So follow my cursor. When you breathe air in, air moves down through the windpipe, which is your trachea, into a bronchus, this windpipe here, and then down into the lungs. That air that you breathe in is high in oxygen. That oxygen diffuses, we'll talk about what diffusion is later, into the arterial blood and is sent all over the body to deliver that oxygen to everywhere it needs to go. Well, at the same time as oxygen is being delivered, carbon dioxide is being produced in your body, and you need to exhale that. So the cardiovascular system carries that carbon dioxide to the lungs, sends it into the lungs from the blood, and then when you breathe out from the lungs to the mouth or your nose, the carbon dioxide is exhaled into the air. So the respiratory system and the cardiovascular system work really tightly together to exchange gas, send oxygen into the body, and send carbon dioxide out of the body. So the major organ here is the lungs, and this muscle here is the diaphragm. The diaphragm is the major muscle of breathing. It contracts and relaxes to change the size of this cavity in which the lungs reside to help increase the volume in here, move air in and move air out. So, my cursor, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. We'll flip back to that next. So air is moving into and out of the lungs basically as a result of the diaphragm contracting and relaxing. The digestive system, its job is to process food, absorb nutrients, minerals, vitamins, and water that you have consumed. And it utilizes things like salivary glands. There's the esophagus, stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, accessory organs like the liver. We've talked about the pancreas, which otherwise would be here, but you wouldn't be able to see the stomach, which is the major organ. This green thing here is the gallbladder. All of these organs are used in some way to digest food and process it so that you can absorb all of the good nutrients and vitamins and minerals and water from that food. Once you have all those nutrients and vitamins and minerals and ions, electrolytes and water in your body, your urinary system gets rid of the excess. It helps eliminate water if you have too much, or salt or waste products, and controls pH. So the urinary system uses kidneys. Remember, what other system is the kidney a part of? The endocrine system, right? So the kidney produces urine, and that urine basically as a component of urine, these wastes and excess salt and water are part of urine. It's what creates it, sent through this tube called a ureter to the bladder, and then you excrete it and eliminate that waste from the body. The reproductive system produces sex cells and hormones. So really you're using the gonads, either the testis in the male or the ovary in the female, to produce those sex cells, and as well as the hormones like testosterone in the male or estrogen and progesterone in the female. That concludes our video for part 1 of chapter 1. You can click on the video chapter 1B to finish it. When you're done with this chapter, you'll take the quiz, and this chapter will be part of exam 1. If you have any questions, shoot me an email, or we can start a Canvas discussion and go from there. Welcome to class, guys. It's a pleasure.